Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords, and today I'm talking about something that has been going in some conflict in the Twitter X sphere for a while now, but that I don't know how much it's made the news on YouTube. And now that I've gotten a chance to talk to one of the sides involved anyways, I think I've got a bit of an insight on what's really going on. And what I'm talking about is Braunsteins. So Braunsteins are, well, the Bronstein is a game that was created by a guy named Dave Wesley, who was very influential in the wargaming community, I think around the Twin Cities. And it was this kind of free-form game. It has... Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to explain what it really is versus what some people are saying it is in a moment here. And the important thing is that a lot of the people that participated in the Bronstein, which was a kind of a, like I said, a free-form role-play activity, which wasn't totally free-form though, but I mean it had certain rules, but it was in many ways closer to a LARP than it would be to an RPG. Let's put it that way. Let's start with that. And those people went on to be influencers of the creation of Dungeons and Dragons. Most notably, Dave Arneson. Dave Arneson was majorly involved in one of the last Bronsteins, and then he, arguably, you could say that he had started Blackmoor thinking it was going to be a Bronstein, okay? But I don't think that's really quite correct, what I just said there, right? And I'll explain why later. The point is, the Bronsteins were this thing that happened in the late 60s, early 70s, and then after... several attempts. Basically, Dave Wesley, who the guy that invented the concept, decided that they were more or less kind of a failure, but that they were kind of fun, right? But that they weren't very good for viable long-term use, and then like the proto version of the RPG showed up and took its place. All right. So there isn't an evolution exactly from Bronstein to RPG. They are related but different. In any case, the whole thing lies dormant for decades. Eventually, in the 2000s, I remember there were people talking about Bronsteins as part of the early influence on Dungeons and Dragons and so on. And now we're up to like the 50th anniversary of D&D, and suddenly you have people talking more about Bronsteins in light of that history. But you also have this funny little cult called the BroSR, and they are obsessed with taking their own vision of what our D&D should have been like, projecting it backwards in time 50 years, and then claiming that that is the real way it was originally being done, And so they've done this with multiple things, with like how AD&D is supposed to be played, with their idea of basically being anti-OSR, being anti-other games besides AD&D First Edition. So to say that back then everybody just played rules as written, there was no such thing. You don't house rule, which is anybody who lived through. I mean, I started gaming when AD&D First Edition was the main edition, and we know that's complete bullshit, right? And now they've gotten on to the Bronsteins, because one of the things that they created, that they invented almost whole hog, and then stole the name of something else that has nothing to do with, is 1 time, right? They have this idea that you should play a game where 1 day in the game world equals 1 day in real life, and that what that means is that if you like end a session in a dungeon, the next session starts 2 weeks later, so your guy's probably dead from being in the dungeon for 2 weeks, right? And stuff like that. And they claim this is the original 1-1 time the way Gygax did it, even though we have multiple people that played Gygax's tables throughout every period of his life saying he never did that, right? But they're like, no, that's the real meaning of 1-1 time. Jeffro told us, right? That sort of thing. So these guys have now hooked on the idea of Bronsteins because they're the problem with Jeffro's nonsense is that he thinks up some great thing, but then he always has to have the next great revelation, right? And the next great revelation has to be even more fundamentalist, further back and more pure than the last one, because his whole deal, he is selling a purity cult, right? He's selling this cult of saying, if you play this way, this is the one true way that is from the ancient times, when it never is, right? It's the same thing that groups like ISIS sell, right? That they're the leader of ISIS invents a version of Islam and says, this is how they did it in the first caliphate. This is the real version, when it wasn't, right? Any historian of the first caliphate will look and say, no, this has nothing to do with what ISIS is doing, right? And it's the same thing here, but that means that after a while, he has to invent a new, purer level to keep his people fanatic, right? It always has to go, generally that means it has to go further backwards in time. So first it was Appendix N, then it was AD&D rules as written, then it was 1-1 time, all of which, by the way, are not real, right? Like none of them, even his version, his interpretation of what Appendix N's importance is, isn't real, right? None of these things are real in the real old school from people that actually played real old school. And now he's gone all the way back, like I say, straight past Gary Gygax's shopping list and got to the Bronstein. And so now the Bronstein is the next thing that has to be highlighted, right? But of course it's not the Bronstein, it's something they're doing. It's already these like ridiculous patron games with 1-1 time that they do that pop up and then fall apart because the whole premise is flawed. But they do this and they're calling that the Bronstein. And what has happened is that on Twitter, some of the people connected to Dave Wesley, and Dave Wesley himself, if you believe those people, and you probably should because they're connected to him, have taken great offense. But the problem is that the people taking the offense are boomers on the internet, okay? And so what happened there is that somebody came out, I think it was Griffith Moore, but it might have been Rob Kuntz, I don't remember which of the two. Or it might have been the guy that runs the con. There's another guy in there who has his name I don't even know. But somebody said what these people are doing, I think it was mainly in reference to a video Harmony Ginger did or something like that. What these people are doing is identity theft. They are stealing the IP of the Bronstein, right? And we're gonna sue. It's like, I can just imagine, like, I don't know why, but I keep getting in my mind, right? I mean, I know Griffith Morgan, I know what he's like, I know Rob Kuntz, right? And it's just like, I'm imagining the two of them and Dave Wesley being like the Flying Burrito Brothers here, right? They're like, hey, man, hey, did you hear what happened? Hey, whoa, what happened, man? Like, there's these people, like, from this weird sect, and they're trying to steal your Bronstein, man. What? Yeah, your Bronstein, remember that game that you came up with in 67? Oh yeah, it sucked. Yeah, but now they're trying to steal the name, dude. It's like, I'm gonna sue. This is what's going on, right? These superannuated hippies, and their first instinct is to just say what comes out of their mouth, right? And of course, the pushback from the BroSR has been this I'm not going to say fake, but over-exaggerated outrage of, how dare you threaten to sue us? You can't sue us. You're not allowed to sue us. Blah, blah, blah. It's not even there. I don't think you even have a trademark, and there's copyright law and all of this, right? But it's not really. That's not really the thing. Like I of course, what they're saying is when they're threatening to sue or they're claiming that this is IP theft, is not exactly correct, But this is the real reason for this, because if you listen, like, the problem is the BroSR people are all expert trolls. They're masters at going on the offensive on the internet And so right now they're the only ones that their side is the one that is getting the control of the narrative, as postmodernists and BroSR people who are basically also postmodernists would say. They are imposing their narrative version of the story over and above everybody else, and that seems like as if it was correct. Like it's their story is, oh, the poor little BroSR, who we're just really big fans of how they did it in the olden days, are being oppressed by these greedy aging hippies who are just trying to make money, and so they're like claiming that because Griffith Morgan is making a book in collaboration with Dave Wesley about the Bronstein, that this would somehow, that this is somehow the real motivation, right? So he's afraid of losing money, right? Which is, it's a stupid argument. The real thing that's going, I mean, I have talked to Griffith Morgan because I was like, look at this. I was like, what the hell is going on here? It was outside of my scope at the moment. I was busy. So I alternate week by week, right? Like this past week, while all this was happening, I was busy having to fight hundreds of leftists who were pissed off at me pointing out that, the taco feast in the Art of the Player's Handbook is actually part of an agenda. They were really mad about that. And the week before, I was fighting with the BroSR crowd. This week, I guess I'm going to be again, maybe, I don't know. But that's how it goes with me, right? Because both those sides, right, the woke leftists and the reactionary BroSR have all the same ideas, right? And they have the same tactics. They just have different team shirts. That's all. So the real issue is that what David Wesley, apparently, if you believe Griffith, and I do, and Griffith Morgan are pissed off about is mainly that these guys in the BroSR have this thing that they're doing, and they're now trying to say that is the Bronstein. This is what a Bronstein is like. That's how you play the Bronstein. And it's wrong. Everything about it is wrong. What they're doing is they're using these like open play things that they've been doing with like their patrons and stuff like that over the last few months, which have largely, it's largely a dead end of activity, but whatever. They're doing that, and now they want, like they're doing it in one time and all that. Now they're wanting to claim that's a Bronstein. That's what a Bronstein was always like. I saw somebody post this like, oh, we're grateful to Wesley because he gave name to what we were already doing, But that's wrong. The Bronstein looks nothing like what these people do. So this is the best evidence that they are just basically liars. They're taking their own ideas and then putting the name of Gary Gygax or Dave Arneson or David Wesley on top to give them and their little sect a false legitimacy, okay? Because this is, the Bronstein is not a long-term, free-form play of characters playing bosses or patrons or something like that. It is essentially a game that is played in sessions, and it's typically a one-shot. It's the sort of thing you play as a party game, right? Because here's what I was going to say earlier, but I'm going to mention it now instead because this is the right moment to do it, is that a Bronstein in many respects has more in common with a murder mystery game or with those Chinese romance or horror-focused escape room type games where they're like, they dress up in period costume and stuff like that, than it does with the RPG. They're saying, oh yeah, the Bronstein was the beginning of RPGs. It wasn't. The Bronsteins was an alternative path of evolution that kind of stopped. It was supplanted by RPGs. But they're now trying to backwards, in retrospect, take a bunch of stuff that was developed in the RPG period, some of it very much later, like one time in the Jeffro sense, which was invented by Jeffro a year ago or two, and project it backwards into the late 60s and say that's what a Bronstein was, and that's what's bothering them. And there you can understand, okay, so Griffith is going to be writing a book about what a Bronstein really is and how it's really played. And so if people have this completely wrong idea of how it was really played, presented by the fakers of the BroSR, that is going to potentially be disadvantageous for him, maybe, right? So if he has an ulterior motive, I guess it might be that, right? That he's bothered by the fact that they're trying to, it's not that they're using, I mean, the term Bronstein is something that historically people were careful about using so as not to do this. But of course, because the BroSR pretend that anything that comes out of Jeffro's mouth is what actually happened in 1973 or whatever, they don't care about that because he's the guy that creates the reality for them. But typically you would use something that made it very clear that you're not talking about the original Bronsteins. And they're just going ahead and saying, no, this is a Bronstein. This is what a Bronstein is. You must do it this way. And in fact, this is the correct way of playing, and this is the pure original vision of the pure D&D that emerged from this primordial slime of the Bronstein. And it is the proof of the true and pure way to play that has not been sullied by the poison of later years or some shit like that, right? So the Bronstein is played usually in 4 to 8 hours. It's a party game in a way. It has a referee, I guess you could say, right? And everybody else is playing a single character. So the original Bronstein, which is named after an imaginary city in the Napoleonic War campaign of this group of wargamers, it had, like the mayor, the baker, the revolutionary, the rich guy, etc., right? And each person is supposed to play that character. They don't roll the character themselves. They don't invent it free form. It is a character that is meant to fit the scenario that the referee has decided. Okay. The game also has move turns, which is not to say that it's like. It's not exactly like rounds or something like that. It's more like people have turns to take action in a war game. The roles are entirely preset, but of course, then the interesting part of the Bronstein, the place where it was influenced obviously by diplomacy, which had become a very big game in the 1950s and 60s, is that outside of the particular moves that they can play, the people who are playing these different characters, the mayor, the revolutionary, the baker, the candlestick maker, whatever, can talk to each other in character, right? And can choose to make alliances or to, try to take a specific conjoined action against somebody else, if they think that they can, trust the other person. But then the orders that they give to the referee determines what actually happens, and you can't be sure if you can trust the other guy, right? Because the orders are given with a series of order codes that are given to you in your character sheet. At least this is after, like, the very first Bronstein was the one I was talking about in this Napoleonic place. It lasted like 8 hours, and by the end of it, it had collapsed completely because it was chaos, right? The things like the order codes was something that was introduced in the later Bronsteins, which was set in a fictional Latin American country called Banania. And, these were like code. You would send a slip with a certain code in it, like U1 or B12 or whatever, and that would be what the referee would understand as the action, because he'd have the master table and he would know what it is, the action that you want to take in your turn. Okay, so none of this sounds like freeform patron play from the BroSR as they have been describing it to this point. And I'm pretty sure none of this is what they're doing now. So they have just decided, they had an idea in their head of what a Bronstein must be like. They decided that was cool, and they've decided now that this is what it is, and that everything else is not a true Bronstein, or it's being done wrong because, you know, Jeffro said so, or whoever, right? Or maybe Harmony Ginger, I don't know. I'm not sure which of the two is actually in charge over there now. It's a toss-up. So this is what they're really doing. It's obviously not IP theft, and again, I mean, I think Driving with Dragons said that he checked, and as far as he knows, there isn't like even a trademark on Bronstein. But it is a misappropriation of the word to something that it wasn't historically. It's a historical whitewash, and that's what pisses me off as a historian, right? You should be reflecting what actually happened, and that's never the interest with the BroSR. The BroSR pretend that they care tremendously about doing the true, pure, unsullied old school, and they're always actually lying about that. They're always doing something totally different than what actual old school players did. So I guess that's it. Anyways, oh, by the way, I have, you know, I'm a big fan of Griffith Morgan. I love Talismans. If you want to get a book that gives you way more of an idea what the original old school was like than anything that anybody in the BroSR has ever done, pick up The Lost Dungeons of Talismans. Right? That is real old school. Okay. But I don't have any association with him economically. I don't make money from him. I don't, you know, he's just a guy who actually cares about showing what the old school was really like, and not doing it on the basis of an agenda. Though, you know, I will grant you that him and Rob Kuntz at least were doing their best to look like real boomers in this argument, in this debate. If they had focused on the fact that it's a misappropriation of the term and not said, well, we're going to, you know, it's IP theft or we're going to sue, that would have gone over a lot better. But to be fair, they're boomers, so they're not, they don't know how to have a fight on the internet. All right. So check out all my stuff. Speaking of trying to do history right, Arrows of Indra. That's my earliest, historically authentic game. Dark Albion, Cults of Chaos. You can use it to generate all kinds of evil sects and groups, and have their motives, have their membership, their resources, their complications, their agenda, everything, and details about all kinds of different medieval cults inside that book. Old School Companion 2, 26 fantastic, mostly sandbox-style adventures that you can use in any OSR game, but of course especially it's made most for Lion and Dragon, that are all based on actual history or folklore, or in some cases, you know, fairy tales or folk tales. Check them all out. Check out also at the Red Room store my latest issue of the Pundit Files, which is Talismans and Jinn magic, which is the magic of creating the magical talismans in the style of the Persian Bazubans, and how to summon, trap, and bind a Jinn based on the historical accounts of how these sorts of magics worked. And I have to tell you, the Jinn summoning and binding, especially the binding part, is just crazy. And it's based on, like, that's the actual, yeah, it's the historical source. I was looking at an actual source, a Persian source, about how you can trap a Jinn, and even there it says it's super hard, you know, most who try this have died, you shouldn't do this, and you know, it's haram anyways, and all this sort of stuff, right? But it is like, it's just amazing what you have to try to do there. I thought that the summoning rules in like Lion and Dragon for demons are pretty interesting, but the Jinn rules there's something out of, you know, like 1001 Nights, right? They're just this crazy thing. Anyway, so check that out at the Red Room store. It's I think it's Pundit Files number 20, if I'm not mistaken now. Or is this 21? I forget. But check out all the other issues of the Pundit Files there too. Only available at the Red Room store on PDF for only $3.50. So if someone can get you $3.50, you can get an issue of the Pundit Files. That's everything for today. Currently smoking Stanwell Pipe of the Year 2019, plus our Gentle Roots.